Hello again, and welcome into the latest edition of the Our Coaching Network podcast. I am John Brice of Football Scoop, and today we are thrilled, absolutely thrilled to be joined by Montana State head coach Brent Vigen. I told him this off camera. I've told him this in person. I'm a big fan. I admire what you have done. I'm not sure I've ever seen a more impressive win than what you opened with this past weekend on the road at New Mexico, the earliest opener in the history of Montana State football. Coach Vigen, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me on. I appreciate your kind words. Yeah, it was a heck of a win. I don't know if it was the prettiest thing, but we will take it.
They don't have a column for pretty. They just
Right.
have wins and losses, and especially when it comes later in the season, a win like that on the road against an FBS program can mean a tremendous amount in playoff seedings and things of that nature. But we're not going to cast our glances that far down the road, I promise. What I do want to ask is the magnitude of a win like that. What does it do for the belief in your program, number one? What does it say about your program, number two?
Well, I think relative to the belief, I think it's significant. We talk about what's between the years and how all the things we can control quite a bit, and it honestly worked at it quite a bit this calendar year. This was a game very similar to a number of our games last year that didn't ultimately go our way. Having the ball at the end of regulation, um, touchdown to win, field goal to tie in this case, and uh, to get that piece done was great. But moreover, in this game, we're down 17 at the tail end of the third quarter, and we after being down 17-0 to start. So I think that piece, when you think about any of our games moving forward, I know our guys, we talk about always staying in the fight, but we just proved it right there to ourselves. Stay in the fight, keep going one play at a time. Offense, defense, special teams, each portion of our team take care of business. Believe in, the other side of the ball, for instance, and we'll figure it out. So, tremendous just resolve. And I think the guys, there was several points in that second half in particular where it probably would have taken most teams to their knees, I guess. And it didn't do that to us on Saturday, thankfully.
So you led me into my very next question, and I promise I did not, for anyone tuning in, I didn't provide any pre-questions. I didn't give you a cheat sheet to look at or a script of the first 15 plays, but you're leading me directly into my next question, and that is, you prepare all summer. You've really prepared for 8 months for an opportunity like that. You maybe think you know your team, but you don't know until you're down 17 with 17 minutes left in the game. What do you learn about your team in that setting? And I guess I know you're mission focused. You're on to the next game. But what's the gratification when you think you know something about your team, and then bam, they answer the call like that in a very difficult situation, and they prove everything that you hoped and believed you know about your team?
Well, I think that's a great point. I think you put a lot of things out there. We did an off-season book study on Relentless Solution Focus by Jason Selk, and we're really intentional about it. And I think there's lessons from the book, but there's a language that you hope comes out of it. And when our guys are, I guess to some degree, speaking that language in those moments, being about the solution versus the problem. We had plenty of problems to dwell on Saturday, and we kept finding solutions, and at least I kept thinking that way. So I think it's gratifying because we spent a lot of time, and you don't know always what's going to stick, but our guys were really intentional. It was, I think, a leadership driven study, I guess, as much as anything, by our team members and by our coaching staff. And, if it even helped us announce in some of those moments on Saturday, it was well worth it.
You touch on that, and I just wonder, from a physical standpoint, we can talk about the mental benefits, but from a physical and a big picture standpoint, I'd like to think I try to help lead the champion the cause of FCS football being really, really good football. Saturday was another example of FCS football being a really, really good football team, football program. What kind of message do you think was potentially sent about not just your program, but FCS football as a whole? Because again, you're down 17 on the road with 17 minutes to go. They've got more scholarship players than you guys do, but you had some great players that stepped up in the moment and met the challenge.
Yeah, I think, and I've felt this way for a long time, that the top of the FCS and whatever that top is, it probably varies from year to year. And then having coached the Mountain West for 7 years in the middle of my two FCS experiences, it's pretty gray, And again, how many teams in the FBS does that bleed into in the group of five, and even sometimes the P5 and now the P4? Especially these early games, you're only able to put 11 guys out there at a time, and the season maybe hasn't taken its toll like it does, a couple months down the road, and where those scholarships maybe come into play a little bit differently. So, our guys go in this game fully expecting to not only compete, but to win the game. And I think for us to figure that out this time, I know we played Oregon State a couple years ago, and it was a pretty sizable margin. Oregon State was a really good team. In my first year in 21, we had Wyoming on the ropes, and we didn't quite get it done. And so to be able to finish the job, I guess this time, amongst a lot of these games that are going the FCS way, going back a long, long time, I think it just shows that, on any given Saturday when you get these matchups, the best in our division can compete with a lot of teams in the FBS.
A lot of teams all over the scope of college football, and one guy, and you've got a bunch of them, but one guy that helps you compete against anybody on your schedule is your quarterback, Tommy Mellott. You've been around some fantastic players. You played the game at North Dakota State. What is it about him that makes him not only so physically successful but mentally successful?
Well, he's incredibly intelligent. I think that certainly helps our quarterback, but he's got a competitive nature that's second to none. And I think as his experience is growing over the last 3 years now into his fourth year, I do think there's a real sense of confidence and calm to him. He had 2 turnovers in that game, which are very unusual for him, that turn into scores. One at the beginning of the game, essentially, and one at the beginning of the second half. And those are plays that can really tear a quarterback apart, and force you to press or whatever, and not just play your game. And that was the one thing throughout that game. He wasn't perfect by any measure, but there was a calm, a confidence. And when you have a quarterback that exudes that, the other 10 guys out there in that huddle, all those guys on the sideline are just naturally going to believe. You can generally see fear and panic in someone's eyes or on their face. And, that wasn't the case. Never's been the case with Tommy. I think our guys understand he's going to fight tooth and nail and give us everything he has. And, I was really proud of, his best stretch in that game was the end of the game. And,
Yeah.
that was probably the calmest he was. And he made some plays and, tolerated some pressure a little bit differently than he typically does. I mean, his best answer probably has been to just run most of the time. And he knew he had to stand in there. And I think made some of the best plays of his college career. And we're going to need more of that. But it's experience is the best teacher, and he's had some of those that haven't gone his way, and he's had more that have. So let's add that to the right side of the list there.
And I don't want to focus too much on this one game because your program is so much more than that. I would personally add, like, your quarterback's a reflection of his head coach, and I watch you on the sidelines. I've studied you for a while now. Like I said, we visited in person before. You have a very steely demeanor on the sideline. I saw that extrapolated to your team and specifically your quarterback last week. And you didn't just make up a 21 or a 17-point deficit inside of the final 17 minutes. You held them scoreless those final 17 minutes at home. You scored your 21 points in roughly about 13 minutes. Just a phenomenal win. I do want to transition. Brent Vigen, head coach of Montana State. I'm John Brice of Football Scoop here on the OurCoachingNetwork.com podcast. Really excited for this one. Pretty obvious to tell. I want to ask you about who has shaped you all the way back to your playing days, maybe even high school. Who has shaped you into the man and the head coach that you are today?
Well, I was fortunate to grow up in a football family. My dad was a high school coach, 9-man football in North Dakota. So I grew up around the game. He coached at one school his whole career. I'm fortunate enough, obviously, to play for him in the middle of that. So that's certainly where my love for the game, the thought of coaching came from. And I was fortunate to go to North Dakota State and be part of that program. Two head coaches while I played, Rocky Hager and then Bob Babich. And I think as I finished out my playing career, I think it became clear that becoming a college assistant coach at the very least is what I wanted to do. I had an opportunity. Obviously, I mentioned Bob was the head coach at that point, but then Gus Bradley, was on that staff as well. And he's ascended to become a defensive coordinator. Had been a head coach for a little while at the NFL level, so a real mentor at a young age to me, and just kind of seeing how to do it, even though he was coaching on the other side of the ball. Um, I suppose 6 years into coaching, Craig Bowl comes to North Dakota State, and Gus and I were the two that he kept around. Gus, for obvious reasons, I think I knew where all the bodies were buried by then. I think.
You had all the
So
keys.
yeah, and then what occurred over the next several years. Coach Bowl had a lot of contacts. He was coming, from being at Nebraska and in particular, but had been at Duke and Rice and Wisconsin, and he brought a whole host of guys through. So I had a chance to work with Dan Enos and Pat Perlis. Van Malone was on one of those early staffs. Ultimately, Tim Albin now, who's the Ohio coach. Jimmy
Yeah.
Burrow was our defensive coordinator through that stretch. So really, as I was able to ascend at North Dakota State, a lot had to do with a lot of those guys, in addition to Coach Bowl. And then our staff at NDSU continued to turn over and had the good fortune to work with Scotty Hazelton and Chris Kleiman opposite as defensive coordinators in that stretch. And then I made the leap with Coach Bowl to go to Wyoming and learn a lot. I'd been at one spot. I'd seen the transition from the Division II era at NDSU to the success we had at the FCS level, but then to go out and take on a job like we did at Wyoming, a ground up deal. I think that taught us all a lot. And I think where everybody's gone on now, Jake Dickert was on that staff for a
Yeah.
while. AJ Cooper, he's at Arizona. I mean, that's a long list of guys that we're all kind of all over the place right now. So it's, to say they all touch you in some certain way and hope that, and I'm sure I missed some names in there too. I know, I've been really fortunate, I guess. And obviously Coach Bowl and the way he shaped his staffs over the year had a lot to do with it. And obviously his impression for me now as a head coach would be the greatest of any piece of it.
So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. You just referenced you only got kept because you knew where all the bodies are buried. Some self-deprecating humor there. Why do you think you got kept? What do you hope a coach back then saw in a young version of Brent Vigen that made him want to be a part of a program transition?
Yeah, and now being a head coach, I think you try to make it clear, and even as a coordinator for young guys, uh, what it looks like at the beginning. I think you certainly want someone that's willing to work hard. I think that's certainly part of it. Get to know as much about the place you're at and really be at the place you're at as much as you possibly can. I think that's really important. Um, you certainly hope you bring some wisdom to it, but it's rarely about that. I think when you're a younger coach, it's you got the ability to figure some things out. You're given a task and you can accomplish it, and you're not one that has to keep asking questions. Scotty Hazelton and I were GAs back a long, long time ago, and we used to talk about you can build a widget kind of. I mean, that's the terminology we use. You could just figure some stuff out, and what does that mean? I think it just demonstrates a willingness to learn, a willingness to adapt, and again comes back to that work ethic piece. So, um, I think I showed enough of that to a person like Gus Bradley, who then he could articulate that to Coach Bowl to say, hey, Viggs knows how to get some things done. He knows, he's running camps. He's recruiting director, all that stuff, or director of recruiting at the time, and it's probably best just to give him a shot here.
Coach Bowl, a revered figure at Wyoming, just retired after this last season. I wonder how much have you been able to talk to him since his retirement? What can you say just about the job that you guys did together there at Wyoming?
Yeah, I visited with him just as we were getting going, so it's probably been about 3 weeks. And I know he's taken on a different role, as executive director of the AFCA. And I think he's really enjoying that. He's plenty busy, I think. But looking back at the decade of his tenure at Wyoming and the consistency that he brought, I think really at the end of the day made Wyoming football relevant. And it wasn't just in an instant, it was over a period of time. I think Wyoming definitely has an identity now that it hadn't had in quite some time. And kudos to him for planting his flag and doing all that. I think there was I'm certain opportunities early in that time. Who knows where he could have maybe ended up, I guess, but he wanted to do right by Wyoming, that opportunity, and all the people that really invested in us and him, and boy, I think at the end of the day, if you leave a legacy, that's pretty cool. And I know he did it at Wyoming. I know he did it at NDSU. He's going in the Hall of Fame there, and that's to have that kind of career where you can say that at two different places, that's pretty significant.
Once again, he is Brent Vigen, the head coach of the Montana State Bobcats, the 33-9 head coach of the Montana State. A remarkable start to your head coaching career. One more question quickly about your past, and then I'm not going to keep you too much longer than this because it is game week. You played week 0. You've got a week 1 game as well, also on the road. So I don't want to take up too much of your time and get greedy here. But you coach Josh Allen. He's one of the best players in the world now. I wonder if you have a favorite moment or a couple of practice instances or just anything where you thought, okay, this is a different cat. Like this dude is going to be known by everybody in the world.
Well, I think there's a few things. The nature of his recruiting, he was a junior college first-year guy. Watched film, but didn't see him throw live until our first spring practice, and it had heard, and we followed the rules at Wyoming. Coach Bull was a rule follower, so we weren't going in, sneaking in the indoor and coaching them up in those winter months. So, just seeing and really, hearing him throw the ball. It's a pretty rare thing when you hear the ball go through the air. So I certainly remember back to the first practice, and he was, incredibly raw and all that. But that stuck or sticks out for sure. I know our first game in 16. We played Northern Illinois, and they were really good through that stretch, really good. And it was a home game. And we had a couple lightning delays. We find ourselves in overtime, like at 2 a.m. Mountain, and ultimately Josh makes a play that he runs all over the place in overtime and scores. And just the plays he made on that particular Saturday, I think we all felt like we really have something. And then just to speak to who he was as a competitor, the next year he comes back and just I think it was the right move for him at the time. He certainly was getting tugged to the NFL after one season at Wyoming. We lost a bunch of really good players. So the beginning of the year, we lost to Iowa, we lost to Oregon, really a couple good opportunities on the national stage for us as a team, and certainly for Josh. Didn't quite go our way, but got pretty settled in. And ultimately against Air Force, I think it was our 10th game, he goes down. And, I wondered that evening if that was the last time I coached him. And really in our bowl prep for our Central Michigan game in Idaho Potato Bowl, honestly didn't know. He wasn't tipping his hand. He had everything on the line. He's taking calls from Dr. James Andrews by then. So it was a shoulder injury, and honestly, coach and I decided we weren't going to press him. So we actually went to Boise and didn't really know for sure. And one of the first things we get with Central Michigan, and and we go to this arcade bowling alley, and they have a bowling contest, and uh, we need a bowler. They need a bowler. Josh steps up and he bowls, and I kind of went to coach. I think this means he's going to play, just because he wanted to compete
Yeah.
and be there one more time with his teammates, and it was just who he was. And a lot of guys in this world that existed back in 16 would have shut it down, and he wanted that one more opportunity. And I think it just speaks to the competitor, but the human being, the teammate, all that he was. And that was an everyday affair. And I think that group of guys that he played with at Wyoming is still really near and dear to him. So it's been great to see him have the success, because it's from hard work. It's certainly a lot of God-given ability, but it's hard work, and it's just him being a competitive sucker who is a great person.
Last couple of questions here. What a great anecdote. Thank you so much for sharing that story about Josh Allen. Again, Brent Vigen, Montana State head coach. I'm John Brice of footballscoop.com on the Our Coaching Network podcast. I've got to ask you, and we touched on it at the beginning, the depth and the health of FCS football. There's been more changes probably in the last 5 years of college football in general than in either of our lifetimes. My time as a sports writer, your time as a really advanced assistant and now head coach. Where do you see FCS football today? How good do you feel about the future of the sport as the transfer portal keeps changing, as some guys get their rosters rated? You don't have as many scholarships as other places, but you keep going out beating FBS teams. You keep going out playing great football, and you keep getting better and better TV revenue ratings. I think because more and more people are seeing how really good FCS football is.
Yeah, you like to think it's a healthy place in the grand scheme of things, in a more pure place than most. Dennis Erickson, former great coach, played here, and he said that with my 3+ years now, going on 4, numerous occasions, he just said, if I was coaching now, this is the level I'd want to be coaching at. So whether that's true or not, I appreciate Coach Erickson saying that. I think just because by and large our guys are motivated by the right things. And that's not to say there's not teams like this at the FBS level. There can't be teams like this, but there's so many external factors that are, tugging at all kinds of thought processes. I know that, and the ability to have continuity at our level, I think, while not perfect by any means, I do think is something that we have maybe a better handle on. But as we move forward, I think everybody in this middle ground of college football, whether it's at the FCS level, the group of 5, we all have to be pretty nimble, because we don't really control anything at the same time, and ultimately what's down the road a few years at the highest level will probably dictate some things. But I know for myself, to be at a school, Montana State, that really values college football, to be in a state that really values college football, let alone FCS football. We're the top of the heap along with our competitors at the University of Montana. So, I think you take solace in the things that, we don't have all these material things that they do at the highest level, but boy, we provide an experience that I think our guys thoroughly enjoy being a part of it, and they ultimately, realize that value as time goes on. And you hope that in itself is a motivator to finish it out here, and to be in a place like this where I think our guys feel how valued they are on a daily basis. It's hard to put a price tag on that. It's hard to put a price tag on a packed stadium that we have the good fortune to play in front of every Saturday. That doesn't happen a lot of places in college football. So, I think it's healthy, but boy, I think it's ever changing, and I think you get better live in the moment, do the best in your moment, be ready for what's up next.
I can speak firsthand. I mentioned to you before we started recording, my wife and I were in Bozeman last month. We were all over the campus driving around, looking at some homes and things, and the support's there. You see it downtown. I believe I saw some new construction to athletics facilities going on the campus when I was there in early July. I've seen the stadium; it's packed. So I'm wrapping up with this question, and I said I wouldn't look too far down the road, but I would be terrible at my job if I didn't ask you about the regular season ending game against Montana, the Brawl of the Wild. Can you articulate how special that football rivalry is? And Bozeman is low key one of the best college towns anywhere in the United States.
Yeah, I think while it's not the only one, it's one of the few as far as in-state, in conference. We don't have NFL football here. Shoot, we don't have NFL football a state away. Um, so when you have that dynamic of the highest level of football in your state and you're competing for the same thing, um, and both programs are supported, have the expectations, um, it's an everyday affair. And I know for both teams, we have 40 plus guys from Montana on our rosters. So you take that piece to it. And I know we have guys that have teammates on the other side. I know we have guys that, their parents went to school there. We have all those dynamics that you obviously want to be on the right side. And there's a trophy on the line, obviously, but for us in our last 3 years, that game has come down. It's the last game of the season, so we've had playoff seeding, conference championship, um, the trophy on the line, and all the pride on top of that. So there's so much that's at stake that day, but it's really a rivalry that you feel every day of the year. And I don't know, there's only a few of those left, I would say. I think that's probably the thing. There probably over time have been a lot, but there's only a few of them left, and I think ours is as special as any of them.
I love that answer. Maybe I'm angling for an invite one day to attend that game. It's a great one. He is Montana State head coach Brent Vigen, 33-9, just entering his fourth year at the program. Already led them to a championship game appearance. Well on your way to more success this season after your first FBS win as a program since 2006 after last weekend's incredible come from behind win at New Mexico. Coach, thanks so much for visiting with myself, John Brice from Football Scoop, and being on our Coaching Network podcast. Best of luck the rest of the season.
Absolutely. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Coach.